This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 2nd of September 2021, and I am 2J.
I'm Tom.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In today's Taifa Leo, Hustler, Bandia. In the People Daily, Guards Fight opens a lid on RUTO's billions. In the Star, RUTO most guarded DP with 257 cops, says the state. And in the Nation, Matiang'i unmasks Hustler.
Yes. Absolutely. Now, has it occurred to you that in the last 3 weeks, William Ruto is being prosecuted in Parliament? Has it occurred to you that Parliament has been building a record of misdeeds by Ruto? The question is why? We have the answer for you. It's impeachment.
Of course.
And that's because Parliament is the only organ that can fire Ruto. Allow us to explain 3 events. 1, 3 weeks ago, CS Fred Matiang'i told Parliament that Ruto's Turkish investor buddy, Mr. Harun Aydin, was a money launderer. 2, last week, James Mwangi of Equity told us that William Ruto never at one time called him, nor the bank, to ask for 15 billion shillings loan. In fact, James Mwangi told us that Equity Uganda can only give 2 billion shillings in loans. He, in effect, called Ruto a liar. And 3, was a Matiang'i bombshell yesterday. Matiang'i told us that Ruto owns over 18,000 acres of land. Not that the ownership of some of that land is in question. He also said that William Ruto actually assigned police officers to criminals. In some, Parliament has in the last 3 weeks received evidence that accuses the Deputy President of frolicking with criminal elements and abuse of office. Are these impeachable offences? Absolutely yes. What's my point here? Parliament is now Ruto's boss. And if Parliament is the only organ that can fire him, then they require a background of acceptance to fire him. Is a background of acceptance enough? Absolutely yes. See, Parliament doesn't need to prove much. It is not a court of law. It is a theatre of national politics. If William Ruto is found guilty in the theatre of national politics, then he'll be found guilty in the court of public opinion.
Indeed.
And that will be enough. Just like that, just like Parliament passed BBI, Ruto will be impeached. Take it or leave it.
So is William Ruto going to be impeached? We can only hope and speculate. But what we can do is simulate how impeachment proceedings work in Kenya and how they might work and apply to the Deputy President. So today we won't focus on the numbers needed in both houses of Parliament. Instead, we will look at the accusations that need to be made to impeach a sitting Deputy President. So, Article 151B of the Constitution governs the removal of Deputy President by impeachment. And under this section, impeachment can happen under 3 ways: due to gross violation of the Constitution, crimes committed under international law, or for gross misconduct. Now, the reality is that we may have to wait for our dear friends in the judiciary to give us an interpretation of what the specifics of Article 150 amount to. But one international definition caught my eye. Gross misconduct is an act that destroys the relationship of trust and confidence between you and your boss.
Yes.
Hi, you dear.
Yes.
But I digress. If indeed impeachment is around the corner, it looks like somebody is building an unbreakable charge sheet against the DP, like Tuam said.
Yes.
And this list, it reads like a movie.
Yes.
Take, for example, the recent revelations in the Paul Gichero ICC case. If more details materialize, the conviction of Gichero could reopen the case against Ruto. And this is only hypothetical. But this would fall squarely under Article 150 of the Constitution as a reason for impeachment for committing crimes under international law. And when Rashid Echesa allegedly conducted a 39 billion shillings arms deal in the DP's office at Harambee Annex, was Ruto implicated? Is this a gross violation of the Constitution? Also, after what Matiang'i told us yesterday, what is the process of getting additional security, whether presidential escort, GSU, or AP? How does one individual acquire 257 armed guards? Who did RUTO call, bother, or harass to even make this happen? And if even his chickens are protected, is it possible that he extended this benefit to his friends? Does the egg, Mr. Itumbi, enjoy the luxury of state protection? To me, this sounds like an abuse of authority.
Yes.
And if so, does it amount to gross misconduct per Article 150? Point is, Parliament is going to be the theatre of war, or the theatre of politics, as Tuam said.
Yes.
And that is why Matiangi took his receipts before them.
Yes.
As Tuam said, this is building a background of acceptance. I guarantee you, this is only page 1 of many. There is much more to come.
Oh, so we stay tuned.
So beautiful.
So yesterday, our panel reminded us that in politics, you should never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. And it led me to reflect on where in RUTO's political life cycle we have reached. Whoever is running RUTO's campaign made a fatal mistake.
Yeah.
Let me explain.
Yeah.
We have all seen the rise of the Hustler Nation and UDA party taking shape. Many had argued that RUTO had full momentum with 341 days to go till the next election. He was in full sprint mode. But politics in many ways is like running a business. It has its ups and downs in the business cycle. And at each cycle, or each stage of the cycle, a good CEO changes tactics and strategy. Now, RUTO has made some fatal mistakes recently. They say that a golden rule of politics is always try to provoke the opposition into a reaction. So I imagine Emmanuel Talam and company saw the removal of some of DP security as such an opportunity, not realizing that they were the ones that were being provoked to react. So when the decision to rush to Parliament was made, they were expecting an increase in the weshe, the sympathy factor for the DP. Instead, what they received was a damning expose, an unmasking of the hustler. This was followed by the onslaught on social media from the core base of DP support, the now aggrieved Hustler Nation. The other mistake RUTO and co are making or made was that just like in a business cycle, his campaign ought to have shifted focus at each new stage, but it didn't. RUTO initially approached the public with this childlike approach, simplifying and dumbing down complex and social economic issues. This won him sympathy with those who felt left out of the system.
Matakojo.
Exactly. And RUTO for the past year has consistently encouraged the Kenyan public to be complacent with ignorance and mediocrity. He has forced the public to believe that it is fashionable to be stupid, vulgar, and uneducated. This is how he destroyed his value, in my opinion. Instead of capitalizing on the hustler momentum, he stayed in the lie for too long. And now his core base is becoming critical of his philosophy. They're questioning a hustler with 5 choppers. RUTO's campaign will now use attacks as a form of defense. But does this strategy also have a downside? If both sides continue to expose each other, will the outcome be a zero-sum game? And usually I wouldn't penalize a rich candidate, but what is more annoying than someone pretending to be something that they're not? I wouldn't want such a guy as my president.
I agree.
That lack of strategy just tells you, if you have a degree in zoology and botany.
Oh my gosh.
He's a botanist. Anyway, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines. All of them focused on the hustler. All of them are unmasking this narrative of the hustler that I think we've been talking about for quite a while. But I think my favorite has to go to the Taifa Leo. With Hustler Bandia.
I completely agree. I love how all these small papers are really overshadowing the big ones.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Power of small.
Absolutely.
There you have it. Taifa Leo gives us our winning.
And now, final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled Botswana, A Modern Economic History by Ellen Hilbom and Jutta Bolt.
It's an interesting name.
Very interesting.
Who named them? Bolt and Hilbom.
So over the past 60 years, Botswana's economy has been one of the most successful in the world. The country's achievement is remarkable because at independence in 1966, its prospects were not looking so good. So Botswana is a sparsely populated, it's around 2 million people, arid country, it's mostly a desert, and it's also landlocked. So at independence, it was also one of the poorest countries in the world, with a per capita income of just $70 a year. And in the first few years of independence, about 60% of government expenditure consisted of international aid. There were also only about 12 kilometers of paved road, and agriculture accounted for 40% of its GDP. But just 41 years later, by 2007, Botswana had almost 7,000 kilometers of paved roads, and its per capita income had risen to about $6,000. And this made Botswana an upper middle income country, comparable to almost Chile or Argentina.
Yes.
The country also regularly surpasses countries like Italy and Spain on corruption indices.
Yes.
So from being one of the poorest countries in the world, Botswana has enjoyed rapid economic growth. And this rapid economic growth has been called an African miracle or an African success story. But what actually accounts for this miracle?
Yeah.
As one writer asked, is Botswana's success due to good governance, good politics, or good luck? So I would argue that it's a combination of all three. Of course, first and foremost, it starts with good luck. Of the 3 countries that control 80% of the world's diamond reserves, Botswana is one of them.
Yeah.
In fact, I think they have the 3rd biggest reserves in the world, or is it second?
Second largest.
Yeah. So since independence, the government has managed to participate in the country's huge diamond reserves on equal terms with the biggest mining company, De Beers. And this contrasts with the negative experiences that many other African countries have had with the West and their own natural resources. And this is where the good governance and the good policies come in. The returns from diamond sales have been invested in health, education, and infrastructure, while also accumulating large foreign exchange reserves and saving enough in good times to be prepared in bad times. So the question is, what can we learn from Botswana's success? In Kenya, we may not have the large natural minerals that they do, but I think we can learn about how important it is to have longevity of good governance and good policies. Botswana benefited from consistency of leadership that ensured that each administration was on the same path for the country. And I think that as we head into the elections, that's something that Kenya should take into consideration. What longevity or consistency can we account for?
No, excellent. But for some reason, I don't think Botswana is a miracle. I actually think they have underperformed. Here's why. There's no way you are the world's 2nd largest diamond producer and your GDP is $17 billion. Yes, you can talk about great governance, great education, great HDIs, but if this does not translate into wealth, then you still have a long way to go. Yes, they have survived the curse of Africa's mineral-rich countries, like Angola, DRC, or Sierra Leone, Liberia, etc. You've got to give it to them. But if Botswana discovered diamonds in 1966 and their GDP is that small, something is wrong somewhere. And indulge me here. See, Israel's GDP is almost $400 billion. Israel has a land size of 22,000 square kilometers. Botswana, on the other hand, has a size of 550,000 square kilometers. This means Botswana is 25 times bigger than Israel, yet 23 times poorer than Israel. Now, Israeli Jews control the diamond market in the world. They control $28 billion of the diamond market globally every single year. Yet much of the diamonds they sell come from Botswana. They don't produce, they simply buy from the Southern Africans, and that means the Jews are simply brokers. But they have made more money than the real owners, who are the Botswanans. Now, you ask yourself, surely, how can Israeli Jews make more money than the source? Who is to blame here? It's the Botswanans.
Yeah, and I guess it's about that value addition.
It's about the value addition. I mean, if
Botswana just exports raw,
that's the thing. If you don't have plans to make diamonds in
rings and
bracelets, and then sell them as end products to the world, and that's how you end up having an economy that is $17 billion.
With all the diamonds.
With all the diamonds.
So the story doesn't actually begin with diamonds. The authors argue that the levels of inequality that you see were initially caused by a cattler economy. So basically, there was a cattle-led growth period, and I think that's what this book does so well. It doesn't just describe the diamond resource, but it describes this pre-colonial period where there was cattle elite. And these cattle elite had a way of even organizing state governance and all that. And that's what they say contributed to Botswana's sort of stable democracy, the idea that they've had sort of a relatively peaceful time, other than the resource-rich countries that have gone into conflict. So they say that, so the authors of the book talk about how inequalities began being institutionalized, not just when diamonds come into being in about the 1930s, but before that with the settler economy. And so they also talk about this settler effect. They talk about how colonial legacies mean that European settlers came and they made a place better by greater access to European technologies, ideologies, education, blah, blah, blah. And I always wondered, it brings to mind the idea of what if there were no whites in Botswana? What if there were no whites in South Africa? Would they have advanced as far as they did? Would Cape Town look the way it did? Would Johannesburg look the way it did?
Zero.
It's not nice to hear.
To look like Gilroy.
Anyway, but that's food for thought, this sort of settler effect. The other thing that the authors tell us about is this gatekeeping state that was formed as a result of these colonial outposts being left to fend for themselves. So you find that the colonial people who came to settle focused on easy ways to get money. And the easy ways to get money was in the primary sector. So in Kenya, we have a huge focus on exporting tea and coffee. That didn't just come out of nowhere. They were focused on getting quick returns by, building these sectors out. They did the same for cattle in Botswana. And I think their biggest markets were like South Africa and the neighbors. And then they go on to tell us an interesting thing about patronage, how in the cattle, when cattle was big and leading the economy, they created patronage networks, which has influenced the politics of Botswana up until today. So those who owned cattle were able to give to those who didn't have cattle in return for loyalty and patronage and whatnot, and has sort of continued over time. So it was a very interesting book. It was long, quite academic, but the lesson here was that it's not only the spectacular that is worthy of writing, so not just the diamond story, but we deserve to expand our history and see how other pre-colonial things may be influencing the economy, how economies are today, even till today. And they finish by saying, as long as the structures stay the same, a change in sources and magnitude of growth cannot cater for change on its own. So we have to dig deep and decompress our histories as Africans. So on a day where we had a winning headline from Taifa Leo, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV. We're GoTV, Pang Free to Air, and Star Times.